When you had that Superbowl weekend where you guys won 500,000, what was your top bet at the time?
We never capped our bet. It was just whatever table max was. Our max bet was like 3 hands of 10. And then I went over there and then he just goes, holy cow, it's 30. The running count was 30. Everybody else was betting $15. I come in. That was like such an amazing feeling. Every once in a while you could clean out the rack. First 6 months, we went from a $300,000 bankroll to over $2 million. My worst backoff experience, like I never saw them coming. There literally was 6 guys surrounding me at the table. I could tell from their demeanor, they're so aggressive, like I couldn't have got out of it. They would have like pummeled me. I had like over 100,000 in cash on me and I had to put it on the table. They suspected me of using a computer. I'm on a Indian reservation in rural Louisiana and they're accusing me of felony. Like, this could go sideways.
I'm calling from Blackjack Apprenticeship and I'm joined by professional blackjack player Mike Aponte. Mike was a key member of the MIT Blackjack Team, leading one of the most successful card-carrying teams in history. He's won millions from casinos and also took down the first ever World Series of Blackjack. He's currently producing the feature-length documentary Housebreakers. Mike, how are you doing?
Good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, glad to have you here. I've heard a lot of kind of how you joined the first MIT Blackjack Team, but I want to start before that. Why did you attend MIT? What did you think you were going to get into?
Yeah, I applied to like a number of schools, and I was fortunate to get into like a number of Ivy Leagues, but MIT just kind of stood out to me during my visits, and it's just because of the whole culture there. Like people are, well, one, I was just surprised how down to earth people are, but then also people are just very creative and really think out of the box, and they just like to try different things. So when people ask me about the MIT card counting team and how it started, I mean, one of the things I like to say, like, there's no more fitting environment as far as like university for a card counting team to be born.
And then how did that actually happen?
Well, like a lot of things in life, it was just, for me, it's like random chance. During my senior year, one of my best friends, Josh, he kind of pulled me aside and he told me about this card counting team he had joined. And at that time, I didn't know the first thing about, I didn't know even know if card counting was like legitimate or something I could do. But of course, I was like really intrigued and curious. So I agreed to attend my first team meeting. And then very quickly, one of the advantages of recruiting from MIT community, people that are mathematically inclined, they can easily understand just how simple and mathematically like legitimate the system is. So after that meeting, I was like, wow, this actually is like legit and for real. And yeah, I was excited to kind of start my card counting journey.
And you also had some financial motivation at the time, correct?
I did. I mean, I was like a lot of college students. I was yeah, definitely not rich. And then I was also actually on a leave of absence, right? Because my girlfriend was going through chemotherapy. So kind of wanted to be there to support her. So once I took that leave of absence, I didn't qualify for financial aid. And so, yeah, Boston's a pretty expensive city. So it seemed like and I didn't know if it was going to work out, but it was kind of like a potential godsend for me.
Did you end up finishing your degree there?
No, I didn't actually. Once I was kind of, I'd planned to return, but then the card counting just took off at that point. And so, yeah, I decided to pursue that.
Can you share what the MIT team's training regimen was like?
Just to kind of backtrack a bit, like most people aren't aware of this. Most people are going to be familiar with the team from the movie 21, of course, which, as you know, completely Hollywood, like far removed from reality. But actually, before we actually even had success, when I got first recruited, the team was an actual legal entity called Strategic Investments. So it was a startup company. And so I got recruited on the tail end of that team. So it was a brilliant idea. But as with any business, it's all about execution. So it wasn't very well managed. And we had all types of issues like team morale. There were I'm sure there were players that stole money on that team. And then we even had a trader that sold us out to the casinos for like $30,000. That's when the casinos first learned of the MIT team. And so that team ended up, the team and company disbanded. And then a few months later, a new group formed. It's much smaller. And I was fortunate to be part of it. It was about 10 of us. And so we fixed like the big problem, like business one-on-one issues. Like one was recruiting, became extremely selective. Trust, of course, first and foremost. And then number two, just focusing on intangibles, as you know, like the art is huge in advantage play. And then the second thing, we made our training literally 50 times harder. And so we were nowhere near as good as we thought we were because the standards were so low the first time around. Of course, like being new to it, the players, we weren't aware that the standards were really low, right? And then the third thing, and you'll find this really interesting, on strategic investments, even though we were a team, we never counted cards as a team. We only did solo play. So we decided to focus on card counting because on strategic investments, they got really enamored with advanced strategies like shuffle tracking, ace tracking, card steering, which in theory can yield much bigger advantages. The problem is they're much more difficult to execute and they're very casino and even dealer based. Whereas card counting, short of barring you from playing, there's nothing a casino can do to prevent you, knowingly or unknowingly, to prevent you from like counting the cards, right? So we focused, it was keep it simple, stupid, right? Principle. Focus on card counting, but then let's make it as strong as possible through team play. And so just those like changes, it was like the dam burst, and we couldn't lose. Like in that first 6 months, we went from like a $300,000 bankroll to over 2 million.
That'll help morale.
Yeah, I mean it was amazing. I mean, as you know, the beauty of team is that if you're executing and winning, as your bankroll grows, you can bet more and win more. Right. So we started off with about a $300 betting unit, and that was in the summer in July. And then by the time Superbowl weekend rolled around in January, our betting unit going into that trip was $1,600.
Wow.
Yeah. And it wasn't a coincidence. That was ended up being our best weekend. We won over $500,000.
Yeah.
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 What was crazy is we were down after the first night of play, we were down 100,000. But as you know, this is part of like the statistical variance of blackjack. So the next, in less than 24 hours after that, we won over 600,000.
Wow. And improving the training standards is like, it's going to help everything, the morale and everything else, because, you know, I tell people if they're a 90% card counter, they're going to have all the swings, all the heat, but not all the results. And so, you know, I'm guessing with strategic investments, without as high a standard, the morale is going to be bad because you're not winning as much as you should be, but you still have all the variance. And so if you can get your game to 100%, at least, you know, you got the results that go along with all the difficult parts of the job.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the edge you can get through card counting it's theoretical in a sense, right? It's not automatic. To achieve it, you have to play with the knowledge and the skill, and that's the skill part is where most people fall short, even those that are really motivated. But when people, I talk to them, you know, aspiring card counters, the thing, just I'm sure the same with you, is like you have to focus on the skills. Without that, you have nothing. Like, number one, you're not going to win without having the skills. But another thing which you refer to, which is so important, is when you have a losing streak, if your skills are not all the way there, you're going to really question yourself. You need to be at the point where you know you're good, not think you're good or hope you're good, right? There's a big difference between thinking you're good at something and knowing.
Yeah.
Right. And you're going to really need that when you hit that inevitable downswing. Like, for example, on the second team, about 3 years into it, we had a uh, a new bank. The way we would work, we would set a win goal, typically about 300 to 350,000. And so once we reached that win goal, then we would distribute profits, right? It was really more for like psychological, and then there were practical reasons too, right? People needed to pay bills. Uh, well, when we started this new bank, like in the first 3, 4 months, we were down like 350,000. It never happened to us before. But you know what? We weren't happy about it, but we weren't worried at all. We were just we knew we were good. That's why we had been playing for so long that at some point we were going to hit this downswing. But imagine if we didn't know
Yeah.
that we were good, right? What happens to most advantage players? They just aspiring advantage players. They just quit.
Yep.
Like they fold. So we kept just doing our thing, and then over the next 4 months, we won that money back plus another 300,000. Right. So that's the skills are everything in terms of actually achieving that advantage, having the confidence to weather the storm, and then also you probably get asked this as well, like people hope that there's some silver bullet as far as flying under the radar. And there are some common sense things, but the thing I tell people is the most effective tool to flying under the radar is having a high skill level so that you actually you are relaxed, you look natural, and you have the bandwidth to pay attention to what's going on in a non-suspicious way. Right. I mean,
absolutely. Yeah. I was going to ask, you said that you guys put more in this second team work into kind of the art, into camouflage. Are there other things that you guys did?
there were just certain practices which are kind of common sense. Like there was no rule book for it, but you figure certain things out, which I'm sure you have as well. Like, for example, a casino has 3 different shifts, right? So each shift in a sense could be like its own like separate entity, right? And limit the time of your sessions. One thing is one practice we did was we never played through shift change, because just in case if there was let's say a floor person's a little suspicious, if the next shift comes on and you're still playing, they just can point at you and say, hey, watch that guy over there. Whereas if you're gone, then there's not only is there no one to point to, but they're probably going to be preoccupied with something else like chip inventory. So we would always like make sure we didn't play through shift changes. And then also you just quickly pick up on which shifts are sharper.
Yep.
I mean, as you know, there could be big variant. One thing we noticed when we first started playing in Vegas was the day shifts, as a general rule, tended to be sharper at that time.
Yeah.
And that's because it kind of made sense, because it's probably the most desirable shift.
Yeah, seniority. They want the day shift.
The seniority, especially because at the time we started playing, we were the beneficiaries of the casino industry just exploding. It sounds crazy, but right when Strategic Investments was formed, there weren't that many casinos in the country compared to now. Like there was this Vegas, Tahoe, Atlantic City, but the Indian casinos just proliferated, then followed by riverboats, and then even the places with casinos, even Vegas started building more properties. So if you think about like the labor force for the casino industry, they had to go from like 1 to 10. So there are so many brand new people.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Also, at the time, the properties in Vegas, they're all kind of independent. When I got into playing Vegas, they just kind of conglomerated all the one club, all the MGM property, But before that, they were all completely independent properties, right?
There was that independence, plus there was that dynamic of like, oh, we're going to protect our turf, we don't care. Like they just viewed it more as everyone else really as a competition. So there was no sharing of information for sure, which definitely helped us. And the technology was primitive compared to now, like VHS tapes, black and white faxes, faxes of information. But obviously, things have changed quite a bit.
When you had that Super Bowl weekend where you guys won 500,000, what was your top bet at the time?
With our team, we're very aggressive, so we never capped our bet. It was just whatever table max was. But our top bet effectively for Vegas on those big weekends was 10K. So that was another example of how like the conditions were incredible back then. It was like on all the strip properties, it was pretty standard where they'd have 15 minimum tables to 5,000 max on the floor, or 25 to 5K. And then on the bigger weekends, it'd be like 25 to 10,000. So effectively, that Super Bowl weekend, like our max bet was like 3 hands of 10.
3 hands of 10.
If it rose that high. But yeah, we especially did well at, I think, Caesars. We had one big player, Wes, one of our best players. He won 200,000.
Wow.
At Caesars.
And did you struggle with full tables, doing spotter and big player? And I'm imagining Super Bowl weekend, it's packed. How'd you get spots for the BP?
Yeah, that's definitely a big a trade-off. Obviously, with big weekends, it's going to give you more cover in terms of, because back then you could get away with back counting. So having a lot of foot traffic was really beneficial. So that was something you're willing to give up a little bit of EV for to get out the big money. Because I would remember getting like during a Tyson fight, getting called in and betting like 2 hands of 5,000, and the floor person didn't even ask for my player card, because the guy at third base was betting 15K. Because at MGM during the fights, they would raise the limit on the floor to 15K, which is crazy.
Yeah.
But then as a big player, there are times when you have the luxury of choosing between 2 tables, because there are times when, and you've probably experienced it, where you see 2 spotters at the same time both have a hot shoe, and then you just quickly look at each one, and then you're going to choose the one that has like fewer players, for example. Or you also, if you can see like how far are they into the shoe, right? Because if there's like 2 decks left, right, you're gonna take the one with 4 decks.
We had a signal that was kind of like, this shoe's on fire, so that you could differentiate, like, okay, I'm getting called into this one, but this one is very hot. Did you guys have an extra?
We did for a time, but then we decided, we're just we didn't want to over communicate, if that makes sense.
Sure.
Because what would happen sometimes, as is you try to go over another shoe, like the count just drops, and but that is something we kind of considered. And I remember, for you guys, did you have like, what did your, because as we had like a code list for the count, mnemonic words for each number. And did you guys use that as well? Did you come up with your own list?
Yeah, we had a system. I don't talk about it, but we had cues, and then some other teams, there's code words, or we never used visual stuff because we didn't want the camera to pick up on it. So it was always verbal.
Oh yeah. We used verbal for the spotters. Our code list went up to 21, of which for that we just simply used blackjack. Because naturally you're probably going to be called in well before them. But I remember this one call in at MGM. The spot, it was so funny because the spotter, I was looking at him and I'm like, why is he back counting this table? This table is completely full except for one spot. Like, that's just not a. And I was kind of looking at him, and then he puts up and then a few minutes later he puts up the hot signal, which was just simply the crossing of the arms, of course, right? Not the ridiculous signal they used in the movie.
Didn't light a cigarette behind his back.
Yeah, exactly. And then I went over there, and then he just goes, "Holy cow, it's 30." The running count was 30 because we didn't have a word for that, and I was like, Oh my God. So it was just one spot. Like everybody else was betting $15. I come in, I don't even have to do a true count
Yeah,
conversion. I just
yeah.
bet 5K. I just flat bet 5K for the entire shoe. And that was one where that was like such an amazing feeling. Every once in a while, you could clean out the rack, particularly on the lower denomination um,
Oh yeah.
tables. But yeah, 30 is like the highest count I've ever had for a 6 deck shoe. Believe it or not, one time for an 8 deck shoe in Atlantic City, it went up to 44.
Yeah, I got one in the upper 40s, 8 deck, and I got cleaned out because they just weren't coming out. The tens and aces were behind the cut card
Which casino is that?
in Washington State.
Ah,
Yeah.
man. Did the count come down at least a little?
I just remember getting CTR'd in the shoe and then the cut card coming out and like didn't get a chance to get them. I mean, maybe it came down a bit, but it's hard to forget a count that high.
Oh yeah, yeah. That's one a frustrating feeling as a card counter, whether you're solo or team play, is when you come into a hot shoe or you've been counting from the beginning, count goes up and you're betting, and then you happen to lose, and then the count ends at like plus 16.
Yeah. Yeah. The irony is it's negative EV as the count's going higher and higher, so you feel like you should be winning, but until those tens and aces are coming out, it's bad. It's bad for you.
Yeah, exactly. Every once in a while, those high cards are all behind the cut card, unfortunately.
Yeah. Going back to the training standards, what did a test out look like for you?
Yeah, so we had different levels of checkouts. So the first was the spotter check. Well, actually, we had a back counter checkout first. That one you obviously would just get trained with the counting, just standing and watching the table. That one we would deal really fast. So five shoes and three counting mistakes max. And then for all of our checkouts, like the magnitude of a mistake counts. So if you're off by 2 on the count, that's 2 mistakes, right? You can't be, as you know, you can't, if you're off by 10 on the count,
Yeah.
that's a killer, right? So there's a back counting checkout. What was great is that if a new recruit, if they're motivated, in a pretty short time, they could start contributing to the team as a back counter. I mean, it shouldn't take you more than a month, right? If they're serious about it. And then not only can they contribute, it was a good natural seasoning because they could actually see how the team operated. And hopefully, as they became better and progressed and they became a big player, right? They already had all that experience. That was the ideal scenario. So after the back counter checkout, we also had a spotter checkout where there was 5 shoes, but you had to play as well, flat bet, and then signal when it was a hot shoe. And that actually was the same for the back counter. Like the back counter checkout, whenever the true count was +2 or higher, you had to cross your arms. For the spotter checkout, you would just do right hand to face. That was just the signal we used for the checkout. Obviously, you had to play perfect basic. As you know, making a basic strategy is a cardinal sin. Should never happen. Basic strategy is automatic failure, and you would be mocked as well. I mean, maybe for a spotter checkout, you might not be mocked too much in the beginning, but certainly if you were later on had progressed to doing a big player checkout, that's just something you don't do, right?
Yeah.
So spotter checkout was also 5 shoes, and then you would bet like chip per true as well. And then that was 3 counting, 3 betting. Also, you would have to make sure all the payoffs were done correctly. You had to ensure you never got like ripped off or underpaid. And then from there, it was kind of a bit of a jump was the big player checkout. That's when you had to bet. Back then, it was a quarter deck estimation, 5 shoes, 3 counting, 3 betting mistakes allowed. And then it was just a tougher test out, like faster pace. Like we always made it for the big player checkouts, you had to play fast. Like you didn't. It's not like the casinos where you could kind of control the pace. Like you just whoever was doing the training controlled the pace. And then the payoffs were what made it pretty tough because if you ever got ripped off or underpaid even just once, it was automatic failure. So like myself, I was like one of the main trainers. We got very good at ripping people off. The key is you don't try to do it that often. You just wait for the right timing to do that. And then we would incorporate like harassment. We would force you to talk, particularly in the last two shoes, kind of ramp up the pressure. So if you were able, basically on that second team, when we raised our standards, like once you made it through that checkout, counting cards in the casino was easy. It was so slow. But that was good because you have like a whole other element you have to deal with in the casino that we tried to replicate in the testing environment, but you can't, right? The intangibles, right? Like dealing with distractions. But yeah, going back to what we talked about earlier, you need to have that extra bandwidth to be relaxed, be natural, but at the same time be aware of your teammates and the casino personnel.
For the second team, what were kind of your guys' expectations forming it as far as investing and managing it? Did you have a goal in mind?
For that second team, we didn't have any hard goals. It's interesting because sometimes you can know, in life, you can know something's achievable, but until you actually achieve it, you're just not 100% sure. So to some sense, we had to have a bit of a leap of faith. Obviously, we weren't basing that on nothing, right? Because card counting was proven decades ago. But yeah, we didn't set like hard goals. It was more of a case of we know this can work, right? Let's make these changes and let's see what happens. Like let's give it our best shot. And yeah, luckily things worked out. From that point on, once you have some success and metrics, then from there we could actually start setting more hard goals.
How did the students handle both their class load and flying to Vegas on weekends?
Yeah, it was back with the team. It was particularly on strategic investments. It was like a very interesting transition, like going from being a college student to like high roller. But it was a fun one. I mean, it definitely helps to be really young. You have a lot of energy. Those cross-country flights definitely seem a lot longer now for me than back in the day. But it was, I myself didn't find it difficult. You really looked forward to it, especially, it's one thing you go from like eating like cafeteria food to, as when you arrive in Vegas, like a lot of like these high-end foods and I had for the first time because of the card counting, right? Like the caviar, surf and turf, and so forth. So I didn't find it, and I don't think any of us found it that difficult. Yeah, because it was something we really looked forward to, and we like kind of really appreciated it, right? We realized, it was such a unique opportunity.
Do you remember your first time being BP and kind of like what that experience was, placing those bets?
Yeah, my first time being an actual BP was on strategic investment. So I'd passed like the big player checkout. And then the first thing that kind of blew my mind was JP, one of our managers, before I went on my first trip was to Atlantic City. And so he transferred me like 50,000 in cash. And that was just crazy money for me to see. It wasn't just the amount of it. It was the fact that he was just handing over this money to me and just trusting me with it. And so I went to Atlantic City. I actually played at Caesars in AC. And it was my first 10 minutes were not so successful and very memorable. I lost 10,000 like in 10 minutes. And then I was like shell shocked. That's when it became really real. Because it's one thing when when you're practicing with chips that don't have any real monetary value. But yeah, that was like And it's one thing to study probability and statistics in a class, but then when you experience it on that level, like standard deviation, it kind of really hits you hard. But I guess the silver lining was they immediately had a executive casino host, and then he brought me up to this nice suite, had like jacuzzi, a pool table. So I regrouped and kept playing, and ended up winning, 25K
Oh, nice.
for the weekend.
Yeah, not everyone can handle that. I trained, one was my best friend from high school, trained him, sent him to go play a game, and he lost 10 grand in, whatever, 15 minutes, went to the bathroom, threw up, and left the casino. He's just like, I can't do this. Did, did, is there any indication that it was going to be a good fit for you, just personality wise?
I think from the beginning, I believed I had like the intangibles because I've always been like a naturally calm person and very observant. Um, but once again, until you actually experience something and have success, you don't really know 100%. So I think I think every successful Advantage player, they had to go through that period where you're not 100% sure. So, but yeah, that first trip, that was big for me, like being down and then coming back on top. And that $35,000 swing, on the second team, right? That wouldn't have been a big deal at all. That's just
One hand.
yeah, that's just part of it. In fact, we had a saying, like John Chang had a saying that if you're not experiencing swings, then you're doing something wrong. Because from what we learned was we kind of noticed with our big players, we had kind of a group of like 5 or 6 of us that were like over time like winning the big money. And then we like had another group of like 5 that went through the same training. They're smart, but their wins were much lower. But what else was much lower was their fluctuations. So there's something going on there. They're not, you know how it goes. They're definitely not betting it up fully
Yep.
when they have the advantage. And the human mind is really, it's a slippery slope. You can easily just convince yourself of things, right? You rationalize because you get a bit nervous. You're being watched. And it wasn't a coincidence that these were great guys, but it wasn't a coincidence that these also kind of were the most timid guys on our team.
Absolutely. Yeah. Was it that Tommy Highland always talks about firing those bets out there, and some people just can't fire the bets out there with the same aggression as those that have success.
Yeah, there was like a guy. This is like a great story. We had he actually was in my dorm. He was a few years ahead of me. Um, he was one of those genius kids. There's always different levels, right? Like in sports, you have LeBron compared to everyone else, and MIT, you have just some people that are like off the charts. But this guy was one of those people who you hear about. He got like 6 different degrees in 4 years. And really nice guy too, and Asian, which is a big advantage, Chinese. So we recruited him, and then he like did really well in the training. And what we required is once you made it through the big player checkout, you actually weren't a full stakes player yet. You had to do a casino checkout where you would get watched at lower stakes. So I actually went with him to Atlantic City, and we went to resorts. And then first I watched him at a $25 unit for just like 40 minutes. He played perfectly. Then I said, oh, now you're up to a $100 unit. So I'm watching him, count shoots up. He should be betting like 2 hands of 300, and he's not raising his bet. And there's like no heat, no nothing. And I'm just confused, and the count stays up there. He never raises his bet. So I give him the signal for like end of session after that shoe, and then we meet. And before I could say anything, he's like, I'm sorry, I just couldn't do it. I felt like they're watching me. And then he had the awareness to say, I'm just not cut out for this, which was true because he was getting no heat. If you can't bet 2 hands of 300, how are you going to bet 2 hands of 10,000 and deal with actual heat?
Yeah. Yeah, we had the same thing. Some people that they had all the intellectual smarts, but they just couldn't do it in the casino. and those people never worked out. You could give them so much time, but there's got to be some ability to overcome the nerves or overcome whatever that is.
Well, sometimes the human mind, like we're our own worst enemy. So there were actually some players where I would just say, "Hey, take a step back." I would say, there's one guy he was a really smart guy, but he was the least efficient player in the casino. The type that just tries to make themselves invisible, right? They blend in. And he would always imagine that there was like heat when there was absolutely nothing all the time. So I had a conversation with them, and I was like, Matt, I was like, tell me, as a card counter, what is the worst possible thing that can happen to you in a casino if they figure out what you're doing? And he's like, oh, they can ask me not to play. And I was like, yeah. I was like, can they arrest you? Are you going to have a criminal record? Is it going to affect your credit? He's like, no. I was like, yeah. I was like, does it mean you can't play in any other casino? He's like, no. And so these are things we all know, but sometimes you just have to like remind yourself of that. But whereas like for you and me, I mean, for me, that's why you do all the hard work. You're waiting for when the count goes up. That's when you get excited. Like that's what it's all about, right? I mean, that's how it should be. So yeah, it doesn't. It is all psychological because there is zero downside as far as what can happen to you. Like getting asked not to play is, if that's the worst thing that happens to you in your life, then you would have had an incredible life, right?
As one of the main BPs, were there any things you incorporate into your act that are memorable?
I think one thing that I found was really effective is you just come up with a cover story, a background, but you don't even have to be very detailed. Just give them a little bit. And from my experience, they'll kind of like in their minds, like run with it. So for me, my general approach is I was kind of the rich kid from a rich family. So it was always about the family business. And I would always, typically I would say, oh, my family's an import export. So if you already think someone has money, then in your mind, you're like, wow, import export or commercial real estate, right? So you just give them that little bit. And yeah, all they need to do, see, as an advantage player, kind of one of your main jobs is, there's different types of gamblers, right? All you have to do, you have to fit into one of those boxes. That's it. You don't have to have some great Hollywood act. You just have to fit in one of those boxes just from that first look.
Yeah.
And then you'll be fine.
Yeah.
Right?
One of our pros, he always says, we're not the droids you're looking for. The Star Wars thing. It's like just something so that you're not what they're looking for in the casino.
Yeah, exactly. And for me, I mean, I was really definitely a huge advantage was being Asian, without question. And so I actually kind of leveraged that, right? For sure. Because as you know, like our youth wasn't working in our favor. And what was interesting for me, because I grew up obviously I'd never been to a casino. I don't know if I certainly would have never gambled, right? Because that's just irrational. And when I first started, when I went to a casino for the first time for the team, I was just surprised. Like I was like, why are there so many Asians? But then I quickly realized that, oh, this is good for me. I hadn't grown up with, there's definitely a certain population of Asians, as you know, that are just hardcore, which is very different from kind of most Asians where it's about, the discipline and hard work. But yeah, that's like a perfect example, just fitting in one of those boxes, right? Because as you know, casinos now they have entire marketing departments dedicated to Asian clientele.
From your experience helping run the team, what are the biggest challenges to being a team manager? We can commiserate on this.
Yeah, and I'm sure you've probably been asked this like over the years. I've been asked multiple times, like, are you going to start another team, or people just assume I have a team, like you're going to join one, and of course people don't know like the reality of it. They don't understand how hard it is, and not only have I obviously I've been a part of a team that failed and a successful team, but then I've also there's been a couple other teams too that I've kind of been involved with in one way or another. And what I've learned is 99% of the determinant of success of a team is it's all up front. It's recruiting and training. That's 99%. It's not 99% of the work, but it's 99% of the determinant. If you don't have that, then you're done. Like all the work you're doing after that is going to be for nothing. And that's the hard part, especially as you uh, are out of college and get older, is finding recruits, finding people you trust 100%. That's a pretty small circle. And then number two, have all the intangibles, right? And then obviously have the ability to count cards. But as I think you would agree, that's actually the easiest to find
Yes.
of the three.
Yeah, I mean that's really why I stopped running a team is after kind of working through our network of people that we knew and trusted. It's like, what am I going to do? Go on Craigslist or go on forums and find people I don't know and trust and build trust with them. Like, it just didn't sound fun. It didn't sound like a path I wanted to go. So once the people that we knew, they were burned out from it, I was like, yeah, I think we're done here.
Yeah, I mean, going back to strategic investments, one thing they were smart about was recruiting for the MIT community. That's like such a fertile ground in a sense, volume wise. Although, still, one of the reasons strategic investments failed is that they had they had no screening process. Like anybody who's from the MIT community can join the team, no questions asked. Which, if you look at it from a business company standpoint, that's like the most ridiculous hiring process. Like basically, if you want a job, I'll give you one. And obviously, everyone from MIT is way more than smart enough to count cards, because the average person, as you know, can count cards. But I have to say, 90% of the people from MIT, I would never recruit because of the intangibles.
So with that second team, how did you find people? What were the red flags or the green flags that someone had what it took?
Yeah, with our second team, it was just from people that we knew. Um, so we started with 10, and then at our peak, we grew in 25 to 30, which isn't like a huge number, right?
That's still a lot for a blackjack team.
Oh, relatively speaking, but I mean, starting from 10, right? So it is like reflective of the fact that we still were extremely selective, right? Because with each person you add, then their network becomes potential recruits. But it wasn't as if we were just, taking in people at a high rate. Um, so when we had a new recruit, they all worked out. I can only think of, off the top of my head, there's only one that I can think of that didn't work out, because he actually was kind of struggling during the training a bit. But we were still going to give him a chance. But then, kind of for us, the tipping point came when he failed the checkout, which it is frustrating, right? Because I think getting good enough to the point where you can attempting the checkout was actually the best form of practice, because everyone would fail, and sometimes in the most excruciating fashion, where there were people that failed literally on the last hand of the last shoe, and they would be so upset at themselves. But without fail, you know what would happen? Like the next time they would check out, they would like pass with like flying colors. Whereas like if they had passed, they would have like just skated by. Yeah, just failing and going through that kind of really makes you better. But we did have this one recruit where he was progressing more slowly, and then after one particular failure, he like picked up his chips and like threw them across the room. He wasn't aggressive towards anyone. It was just mad at himself, but yeah, it was kind of obvious that he didn't have quite the right temperament.
You're not going to go great in a casino if you can't handle your emotions.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, if you had that high of a success rate recruiting, what were the things that you looked for, the intangibles?
Being someone that was just naturally relaxed, right? Or it was kind of like a very binary thing. Like we were talking about earlier, like a successful to be a successful advantage player, like why should you be nervous about putting out the money? Right? It really is that simple, right? Should be something you're excited about doing. And so that becomes evident very quickly. Like even in practice, like you can even tell as you've experienced, even in the early training, you can see like how does this person take to it, right? Because there are some people that even get like upset in the very beginning when there's no real money at stake. And then also people that get flustered at making mistakes, right? I definitely like people that have high standards and they want to like keep getting better, but people that lose their cool, that's always kind of a telltale sign.
Yeah, or spiral they make one mistake and then it's just going to be a cascade of mistakes because they get in their own heads. Or I'm sure you've had that when you're training someone.
Yeah. You probably, what I would do when I was doing like particularly the big player checkout was, I mean, the player was largely, how well that player performed would largely dictate how hard I was going to be on them. Like if they were playing well, I was not going to, I was going to be less likely to try to get them, if that makes sense. Like push it. Like if there's a good flow and they're playing well, but then if they're like being like kind of consistently slow with their bets or a little off, then I would feel a little bit annoyed. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to push them harder now, you know, push them harder. And then there are times where I'm like, okay, if I fluster them a bit, let's see how they react. And then sometimes, yeah, they just fall apart. They've been like just sailing through like three shoes. They make a couple mistakes in a row, but they're still like there. But then they get rattled, yeah, and they just let the rope go.
Probably my biggest regret running a team is not having higher standards, and it seems like you guys really, really nailed that part. I mean, I thought we did have high standards, but I look back and it's like, no, they should have been even higher. But it seems like you guys really nailed that. I think that's a good part of why, if someone can pass that, they're either not going to make it or they're gonna rise to the occasion, pass the hurdle, get over that. And if they do, it's pretty, like you said, pretty easy in the casino.
Yeah, I would say that was the number one reason the second team was successful. But the only reason we got there was because we failed the first time. There was definitely a lot of hubris on that first team, right? They just assumed like, oh, I think part of the reason why the standards were so low is, oh, these are MIT, people, they'll be fine. And then part of it was just eagerness too to get players playing as soon as possible. But yeah, you learn from your mistakes. We kind of fixed that. But yeah, definitely the high standards I would identify as the number one reason or one of the top two reasons, and then the other one being selective with recruiting. Like those are kind of, I would say, the big two. And then number three, just having street smarts and just adapting. Like, you know how it goes. There's no handbook, right, for how to connect. You just have to observe, learn from some mistakes and adapt, right, if you're going to make it long term. Because I'm sure you've seen like there are a lot of amateur card counters that do things that are pretty silly, like meet on the casino property, for example. They'll have like lunch together. That's kind of pretty common sense thing.
Well, I'll tell a stupid thing we did our first team. This is before we started recruiting, training other people. It was just four of us playing together, and we were getting, countermeasured at a casino. And so we're like, okay, where are we going to go next? So in the casino restaurant, we had a map, and we mapped out where we were going. and they had people sitting at the table behind us listening to us. So they called ahead to the casino. It was like, it was the dumbest possible thing we could have done. We must have had a comp or something. So we planned where we were going there at the casino restaurant and show up at the next casino, 3 hours away, and they were waiting for us. So yeah, amateurs.
Yeah, I mean that's probably I would put in terms of like casino procedures and how to. That's probably the number one thing, just avoid association, because at that point you've made it so easy for the casino.
Yeah.
Because if you have people that are on the casino floor together, acting as if they don't know each other, and then they're meeting for lunch. As on the casino side, you don't even have to figure out what they're doing. It's like they're obviously not working. Yeah, they're obviously working together, and yeah, at that point, yeah, you've done all the work for the casino.
Yeah. Well, we learned from it. But so you said that when you guys got started, casinos were just opening up, the tribals and then the riverboats. What regions did you guys get the most hours in?
Probably the Midwest, all the riverboats over in Indiana and Michigan. We played a lot there. Like Grand Victoria, I have very fond memories of, and Elgin back in the day. I think from what I hear, it still has the same layout. Have you ever been to Grand Victoria? So is it still the same where they just had these two huge pits?
Last time I was
next
there,
to
that's
each
what
other?
it was like.
And but when we started playing there, they didn't know anything about advantage play, and so you had so many tables, and as you remember, they had just really great lines of sight, where with teammates. So we actually, we would record all of our play, right? So in terms, we would know our EV for each trip, and obviously like call-in rate per hour. We would track that per player. But at Grand Victoria Elgin, we averaged more call-ins per hour than any other casino because of like the number of tables, the lines of sight, and they were not knowledgeable about advantage play. I mean, the game was not the most incredible in terms of rules. As you remember, it was like when I played like 2K max, but just the number of call-in, pretty decent cut card at the time. Yeah. And I have like such fond memories because of, as a big player, when you're doing like the call-ins, you have to be a bit restrained in how quickly you move from table to table. But there, I became so well known and liked by them. It just became part of my MO that I would run from table to table. It became like a joke. Like I would run from table to table.
Wow.
We could get away with it not only because they weren't knowledgeable about advantage play, but we were really smooth at passing off the count, like verbally, and it helped. As you know, there was always a lot of bystanders watching, where our spotters could easily blend in.
Well, unfortunately, they are aware of advantage play in those riverboat casinos now. But that sounds like the dream sessions.
I think, yeah, I'm pretty sure that's because of us.
Yeah.
I remember when it first started. Like after playing there for a number of trips on the night shift, this 4-person pit manager started following me around, like literally everywhere I walked. He would put down. Every table I stood behind, he would put a no mid-shoe entry sign, and they didn't have any no mid-shoe entry tables. And then that's when like, oh, this is kind of beginning the end. So
did that second team exclusively do spotter, big player, or did you split up and do solo play also?
No, we did entirely team play on the second team.
You mentioned that $300,000 downswing when you started a new bankroll, and then it turned around fairly quickly. Were there any just brutal bankrolls that you guys experienced, just really tough losing streaks?
No, that was the only one. That was the only downturn. I mean, that's kind of the beauty. It's tough if you're able to get everything. If you have all the ingredients, you have the right players, train them properly, and bankroll. I mean, yeah, I mean, that's one of the biggest advantages of a team is being able to pool your capital and weather storms. And then if you can just if you're able to execute, then I mean, a good analogy is you become a micro casino essentially. And so that's really going to like smooth out the intermediate fluctuations.
There's a story of you traveling with $300,000 on your person. Is that true?
Yeah, that's true. That was after the $500,000 win in Super Bowl in Vegas. So one of our rules is that every player, when you carried team inventory, whether it was cash or chips, you were personally responsible for that. But we also made it clear that when we were in transit, either to or from a place we're going to play, if you weren't comfortable carrying that, then you could transfer it to someone else. So like senior players like myself typically would carry the most money and chips, right? So obviously when you win $500,000, that's going to be a lot of money to bring back. So I was like responsible for 300,000 bringing it back. And I don't know, you might have done the same. It was a different time back then. You could actually wear hats and coats like when you walk through airport security. So our general approach.
Did you have a giant cowboy hat? Like,
No, it was well, what happened was I had the 300,000. So the cash, we never put it through the X-ray machine, right? Because they can see that. So the cash you'd always put on your body. And as you know, you even in just jeans, you can put like 40,000 easy, 20 in each front pocket, like no problem. But yeah, 300,000 is a lot. So it's like pretty packed. And in the last 30K, I literally had no room. Because what you do is as you've done probably, is as soon as you arrive at the airport, you go to a restroom, right? And then you transfer all the stuff onto your body, right, from your bag, your travel bag. And then the last 30,000, I literally had no more room for. But yeah, I had it was actually like it was a casino cap. I think it was a Superbowl casino cap. So I put the 30,000 on top and cap on top and like walk through. So, but yeah, it was a different time with security back then.
yeah, it made things much harder when they added those scanners, but that's TSA pre-check. You don't have to do the scanners, but you're not walking through with 300,000 anymore.
Yeah, although you can do, I don't know if you have like, I've done like 40.
Yeah.
Right. I don't know if you do the same trick. What I do is you'll have like 20, I'll put 20,000 in a white envelope and another 20 another white envelope. And then when you walk through, I take the envelope and hold it up. And if they ask, I'm like, oh, this is just cash, right? So it always goes back to how you act. Like if you just act normal, because you're not doing anything wrong, right? It's your money. They're like, okay. Especially if you're like, flying to Vegas or something.
I've had it where it's the cash. We did the envelope. I'm sure we got it from, heard about this from your team, but the envelope and then a bunch of chips in the other, in a plastic bag in the other hand. What are those? Those are chips. And they're like, oh, can we see them? Yeah, but I'm not going to let them out of my sight. And they scanned me and went on my way.
Yeah, the chips are interesting. The chips we sometimes would put through the X-ray machine. It's definitely always going to get stopped because it shows a blob, but psychologically it's so interesting because they'll look at it, and you probably did the same thing. We would really focus on only bringing back yellow chips, right? The $1,000 chips, so just in terms of bulk. Because like for the bigger property in Vegas, we always pretty much had 300,000 in Vegas chips, right? Because yeah, if you want to bet like three hands of 10,000, you can't come and start over, right? With just 10,000 for the day, you need to have chips. But there would be times where they like look at the bag and it's like 60 yellows, 60,000s, and they're like intellectually they know that's 60,000, but it just doesn't register. They're like, oh, okay. Whereas if it was cash,
Yep.
that would
Absolutely.
be different, animal.
Did your team do any international play?
We didn't do much international play because it just opens up a whole other can of worms. I think the trip that really deterred us from international play is I went on a trip with another teammate, Martinez. We went to the Bahamas when we actually did well. I think between the two of us, we won like
Wow.
90,000. I played big at Atlantis. And then I want to say Crystal Palace is where he played. So we spotted for each other, right? And then we did play some shoes as well, right? Because so there was only two of us. The Bahamas are great because there's no CT. You don't have to worry about in terms of the casino. There's no CTR. So I had like when I cashed out, yeah, they gave me. I gave them like 70,000 in chips, and they just cashed it out, which was pretty cool. But the hard part, it was interesting. Now leaving the country, I declared the cash with customs, U.S. customs, leaving the country, right? Because you're not supposed to take more than 10. So I didn't want to take a chance. I declared it. They were very like nonchalant. They're like, oh, okay. But then coming back, I had some issues. Like I reported it to Bahamian customs, right? And then immediately they suspected me. It makes sense because I was like young. I'm sure they expected I was involved in like the drug industry. So they kind of politely brought me to a room, and then they were asking where I got it. And it was funny. I guess being young, and yeah, I wasn't nervous at all. I just said I won this at Atlantis. You can go call them. And then they brought in a drug sniffing dog and sniffed me, and then so they looked at me for a bit, and then they let me go, and I was okay. But what happened next was that there were some other players on the team that heard that we had went to the Bahamas, and of course there was this one guy. He had just passed a big player checkout, so we actually developed a West Coast contingent. Interesting enough, there was two of them actually. We had one that was kind of in Santa Barbara because one of our best big players was an engineering grad student at UCSB, and so he had been recruiting a few people. And then we also had one that developed in the LA area, more around like JPL people, right? But anyway, one of the new guys from UCSB, he wanted to go there with his wife, who was also on the team, who was a spotter. And I remember having reservations because he was a good player, but he probably had the worst look for a big player because he was like 5'5". He was British. He was white. He wore glasses. He looked really smart because he is, and he just had a very polite demeanor. And but the UCSB group was like, no, just let him go. It's like he went with his wife, and they played at Crystal Palace, and I think he was up 30,000. And then they figured out he was card counting, and then they brought the police in. He got detained, and the police initially were just saying, oh, just give the money back. And then when he refused, they threw him and his wife in jail. And then we not only lost, we never got back not just the win, but the money he brought. Oh. And then he and his wife like never played for us again. So after that, we're like, wow, yeah, we kind of take for granted that, like in the U.S., granted, there can be there have been incidents where casinos push the envelope, but for the most, you don't have to worry about your safety, right? Whereas, particularly in developing countries, you might have heard of stories where literally there are advantage players that have had guns pulled on them by casino managers. It's just can be a very different animal. In the first world countries, you'll be fine, but then you still have the issue of getting money in and out. And then it's common practice internationally, in first world countries in particular, that you have to show a passport. So for you and me, that would be the end of it, right? Trying to enter a casino.
What was your worst backoff experience like in the US?
So my worst backoff experience was definitely in Louisiana. So people, they assume that I've been backroomed in Vegas before, but I haven't. There was like Caesar's Palace tried to back me off. Caesar's Palace tried to backroom me. This was actually my first trip ever on strategic investments to Vegas, right? This is like its whole other crazy story. I went there with Martinez, and then that's when we were the first ones to find out that someone from strategic investments had sold us out to the team, right? Because we got called. Martinez was the one that was playing under his real name because he brought like it was over $100,000 cashier's check. And then he got called down. His casino host got called him the next morning to come down. We played very little the first night. And then it turned out to be a good thing. Like right before he went down, he said, "Do you mind coming with me?" He goes, "Something feels a little weird." And I remember being really annoyed because I just wanted to sleep in. So I just went down. Like I was just in shorts and a tank top. We went down. We're talking, this was like 11 in the morning, and we're talking to his casino host about nothing. And I'm thinking, why are we here? And then three guys in suits walk in, and they're like, oh, they're from corporate security. And then they start like interrogating us, and they're really focusing on Martinez because he used his real name. I didn't, I was using an alias. And they were saying, how did you get this money? Is this money yours? And he said, no, this is my money. I came with the check. And he kept going on. And then it got to the point where I just said, what's going on here? I said, we haven't done anything illegal. Like, what's going on here? And he said, well, the problem is, and then he pointed to Martinez, is we have your name on a list of people from MIT that are going around cheating casinos. And then of course, like we're thinking, yeah, inside I'm like, what is going on? And then but yeah, we did a good job of keeping our cool. Martinez was really, he was like me, he was really cool under fire as well. And I just said, at that point, I just said, hey, if we've done something illegal, you should just call the police. So that was like really very early on, but I remember I'd learned like, don't go to the back room. Like they don't have that right. So they got frustrated with us and they said, we want you to pack up, get your stuff out and leave. So they escorted us to the cage because we had like 10,000 in chips. Then up to our room. They like came in our room with us to pack up our stuff. And then as we were walking, they're like, oh, we got to go back here. And I said, what's back there? And they said, oh, you'll see when we go back there. And I said, no, we're not going back there. And then one of them like put his hand on my elbow and I like tensed up. I think one thing that helped, like back then I was like really into lifting weights. Like I was a big guy and I was like, we're not going back there. And then whoever was in charge, he had been quiet the whole time, kind of stepped up and said, okay, just lead them to the taxi cab line. So they led us up there, trespassed us. Then they were listening to where we were telling the cab driver to take us. So we didn't want to give them a casino. So we just said, just take us to the airport, because we were trying to just figuring out like what the heck is going on. So we get to the airport and we call up one of the managers of SI. This just kind of shows you how badly SI was managed. We told them what had just happened, and we said there were about like 5 or 6 more members of the team that were arriving starting the next day to play at Caesars. And we said, yeah, you have to tell them not to come. And you know what he said? He's like, oh, they'll be fine. And keep in mind, like, I'm like just brand new to the team. Like, I don't have any authority. I'm thinking, what is going on? And then that group of like about 5 people, they did not avoid the back room. They all got back roomed. One of them even got handcuffed and like detained back there. And he never played. Yeah. Again for the team. So I avoided the back room then, but then it was like some years later that I got back roomed in rural Louisiana. And that's the only time in my career I've ever been nervous, because at this point I was already like starting to get known by the casinos. And so when we were playing, I wasn't playing the big player. I was like a spotter slash signaler. And then they actually got me pretty good because I have a good, you develop a good spider sense for when things like I never saw them coming. It was like just like that. There literally was six guys surrounding me at the table, and they were just so. I could tell from their demeanor they're so aggressive. Like I went with them because I knew that they would have like I couldn't have got out of it. They would have like pummeled me. And I was just wondering what is going on. So they bring me back to the back room, and then I find out why they're so angry. Someone recognized me from the database, but then for some strange reason, which I still don't know why to this day, they suspected me of using a computer. And so they left me there, and then I had like over 100,000 in cash on me, and it was like I had to put it on the table. They didn't take it, but they're like empty out all your pockets and and so forth. So the casino manager left me there with like this like 6'4" security guard. And so I was at that time I was like, wow, I'm on a Indian reservation, which is its own sovereignty, as you know, in rural Louisiana, and they're accusing me of a felony. This could go sideways. Like, what's going on?
Yeah.
So I was like nervous. And so I was there for like 15 minutes. And then the casino manager comes back, and then he has like this half smile on his face. And I was thinking, is this good or bad? And then he reaches his hand out and says, no, you're good. We know we aren't using a computer. And I'm like, I was like, okay. So that was actually the only time I've ever like told the casino I was card counting. Because when they said they were suspicious of the computer use, I said, look, I'm card counting, but I'm not using a computer. I'm just using my head. I'm not using a computer. And then it got so surreal at that point. Like then they were really friendly, and they're like, and then the surveillance director came down, and they said, "Yeah, we've heard so much about you guys." And this is like well before the book, and obviously well before the movie, but within the casino industry. And they're like, "Oh, can we get a picture with you?" And I'm like, "This is just." I was like so exhausted at that point. I said, "All right, let's take a picture." And then, yeah, obviously they told us very politely that we couldn't come back. Yeah. So that's the only time I've ever been back.
What would you say has been the most rewarding aspect of your AP career?
People sometimes ask me, like, what was your, like, as a high stakes card counter, we're like, what was your motivation? Right? What kind of gave you the drive? And I think what I loved about it, and I didn't fully realize this right away, right? Because of like you kind of have to achieve some level of success, right, to get a good sense of it. Was with advantage play, like I really loved the challenge of like playing like perfectly and optimally while like fooling the casino at the same time. I think that's really what I loved about it. It's like this to excel at it. It's this like marriage of science and art, and so I felt like I definitely had that cross section of traits and abilities, and it's something, as you know, yeah, most people don't have that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's not. Yeah, once again, it's not even about the math ability. It's really the other aspects of it.
That's true. There's very few things that are that thrilling to, you're pulling it off. You're executing. You're using your brain. Like it's almost. I said this on a podcast. It's almost like kind of flow state. You're like doing everything right, and that you're getting the better of the casino, and they don't know that you're doing it. There's something so satisfying about that.
Yeah, it's an interesting dynamic, which if we would prefer not to have to deal with getting barred, but at the same time, that kind of adds to the challenge, right? And that adds this whole other element of the experience where if you think about it, you've been through it, you get a taste of what it's like to be like undercover, right? Not to like overinflate it, but yeah, you are undercover and you actually get a little taste of what it's like to be a criminal in a sense, to be wanted and to try to fly on the radar without obviously the downside, right?
Yep.
Obviously not actually being a criminal, but you actually experience that no matter how seasoned you are, you know, you still have a little that dynamic like, oh, I don't want to get caught.
What was more thrilling, the $500,000 Super Bowl weekend or winning the Blackjack World Series of Blackjack tournament?
I would say that winning the 500,000 was definitely more fulfilling because it was like such a team effort. The World Series of Blackjack win was more thrilling because in the sense it literally came down to the last card where I had the advantage right before the dealer played her hand. I had the advantage probability wise, and then when she flipped over the whole card, the advantage swung to the guy in second place, and then I got lucky, right? That's that's the thing about advantage play in life, right? Like luck's always going to be a part of it.
Yeah.
So,
Can you tell us about what people can expect from the documentary you've been working on?
like my whole mission was, well, one, just to introduce to the average person, the public, even the average gambler, they don't they probably haven't even heard the term advantage play or player. So introduce like that term and then kind of give like an insider's perspective, not like kind of a superficial like Hollywood depiction of that from kind of both sides of the table, both the advantage players and also the casino side of it, right? Because I mean, ironically, they're two sides of the same coin, right? Casino's objective and advantage players' objective is the same. Maximize betting volume um, at an advantage, right? So kind of doing that through like interviews, different stories, but then kind of carrying that theme farther where you can be an advantage player in any field. So, example, we interview like Maria Ho, one of the best professional poker players, also a sports analytics team, company startup that has like this really like innovative like technology to help give athletes an advantage, and then also in the financial markets where a lot of like there's like a big crossover, right, in terms of advantage play and gaining an edge uh, in trading and so forth.
Very cool. We'll make sure to let people know where they can find it when it's available. And thank you so much for sharing your story with us. And it's nice to talk to someone that's like been through some of the same experiences. I mean, gosh, hearing about the MIT team and the stakes and the where the casino world was at is a lot of fun and sounds like just what a unique time and experience you guys had and how you crafted it well is very cool. And we're looking forward to the documentary too. So thank you so much.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me. It was nice to be able to swap stories with a fellow advantage player and former team manager.